you see it in like Denmark a fair amount. They like took on Jesus Christ as an additional god in their pantheon. I love that so much. It's so cool. And they were like, no, you're doing it wrong. You're not worshiping God. And they're like, oh no, we are. Yeah, look, he's up there. He's with them. It's fine. Yeah, no, he's there.
Just like the rest of the gods.
Just like the rest of them. They're like, no, that's the problem. What? It's the other ones we're worried about. Oh, don't worry about it. You don't have to worship them if you don't want to. It's fine. Like, no, you can't worship them. Like, oh, no. No.
Hey YouTube, welcome back to our channel. My name is Yelena.
And I'm Bjorn.
And this is Vikings React, where we take a look at some of your favorite Viking shows and discuss their historical accuracies.
The Last Kingdom's out today, so we're excited. Don't watch ahead. Watch it with us if you hate yourself. So, while you're watching this and we're filming that, we're gonna try to have that one out tomorrow, right? Mm-hmm. As like a special thing. Anyways, Vikings Season 6, Episode 9. You ready?
Let's do it.
Let's crush it.
Upa is especially interested in your journeys to the far west of here.
I was sailing west from here, along the land, when a storm blew my ship off course. When the storm had ended, there was no more land. Then, one morning, the sun rose behind me, and I saw it. I saw a new land. And I saw marvelous pine groves and vast fertile plains. I tell you, Uber, son of Ragnar, this was indeed golden land.
I'm curious what the land is that he's talking about. Would it be something like Greenland, perhaps?
Greenland was desolate.
Greenland was desolate. I mean, the only other option is North America.
Yeah.
Wineland.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what he's trying to hint at. Though you gave
Golden.
you gave me the look at the Golden Land.
Yeah.
It's not anything in terms of like a Viking name of Golden Land.
Right.
But like I think they're just supposed to mean like bountiful, like the Promised Land without saying the Promised Land.
So Vinland.
Essentially, yeah. Just like a highly fertile, easy life, which would definitely indicate North America, Canada, if you will. So like the first account of settlers in Greenland was actually not Leif Erikson, who like set up shop there, but a few other Vikings had actually traveled to Greenland, but never like established anything because they kept getting like turned around, or there were like a ton of tiny little islands off its coast, and they couldn't like really navigate it too well and like find a good solid place to like dock their ships and things like that. So it was known about and like witnessed and visited before Leif Erikson established his like camp there.
Right.
But it was never like explored thoroughly or anything like that. They didn't map it. Even though we have that Vinland map, it's not a Viking Age thing.
It is kind of weird for them to be skipping over Greenland just because Greenland is sort of like on the way to North America.
Yeah, you
so
have
for
to...
him to just like kind of sail way past it and then like straight to North America and then get turned back around, find an island, and then end up back in Iceland is a little bit strange to me.
And like if something like that were to happen, it would have been because he got blown off course or like caught in a storm and like sent out to the open sea. Because typically what would happen in the Viking Age with their ships and their like nautical technology, essentially, like even though their ships were in a lot of cases able to withstand like rough seas and things like that, it wouldn't make sense for them to completely bypass Greenland because you have to go to Greenland to then make your way to Iceland if you're following that navigational method. They wouldn't just kind of sail straight across like we can nowadays because we have like radar and all kinds of shit. And they really were pretty limited in terms of doing that. So they always wanted to kind of keep the coast in sight when they were traveling. So then, during night, they can like beeline towards the nearest coastline and, set up a quick camp. Or even just anchor themselves there and be as is. But
yeah, and he did mention that when he was sailing out of Iceland, he did get blown off course.
Exactly.
There was a storm, so understandable. But even still, to go from Iceland straight to North America, that's quite a distance.
That's a long way.
Even if you do get blown off course, and to be able to find your way back that's feat. He's a sailor.
Well done.
If he did that.
Yeah, he is beloved by the gods.
Yeah, but him saying that, the land was gold and everything, that does allude to North America, because when they came here, they found fields of wheat, and they found grapes and abundance here. Essentially,
like the largest salmon they've ever seen was also like specifically like written down as well.
Yeah, exactly. So the reason why it's called Vinland in the first place is because of the grapes. It was wineland.
Yep.
And wine was important to them. Curious to see if they extrapolate on that anymore, or if they're just kind of leave it like this.
They brought Eric into the show for a reason. I'm hoping he's their midway jumping point
Between this and Netflix.
Yep.
To the Golden Land!
Is that what the show is going to be called? The Netflix spinoff?
The Golden Land.
Good party.
Wow, he's just not hiding any of it.
Eric, and you know the story of Freya?
Yes. She is the goddess of fertility. She lives in a hole called Sesrumnir and travels in a chariot drawn by cat.
The fact is, her necklace, the pleasing woman, was paid for by sex with the dwarfs who made it. Loki accused her of having sex with every single one of the elves in the Aesir, and she shares half of those slain in battle with Odin. But when her own husband is away, she weeps. But not watery tears, Ingrid. Tears of gold. Now you are free. Go and marry my husband. With my blessing.
I can see it.
Look at that.
That was actually a really cool scene. I gotta say, it was
Cool.
Yeah.
This is the kind of content that I want to see from Vikings.
The retelling of the story is them like talking about the sagas, even with the gold tiers, it coming into like their present day essentially.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
It's cool, yeah. That kind of stuff is really cool to see, and like that's why I liked the show from the beginning, because they had these little moments of like the mythology overlapping with reality, and I really dug that a lot. Mythology, yeah, that's a true story. So all of what they said, her hole in Asgard, cart being drawn by cats, goddess of fertility, kind of thing like that. Absolutely. She also supposedly is the leader of the Valkyrie. She takes half of the battle slain from Odin.
She gets first pick.
We're talking about Freya, obviously.
Yeah.
Freya. She's not heavily prevalent in a lot of stories in the mythology. She will more often play like a supportive role. You'll see her more when Loki gets into trouble and is trying to like make amends for the trouble that he gets into. Usually because he usually tries to borrow her falcon cloak, which is this magical cloak that turns the wearer into a falcon.
Right.
Which is cool.
So you can fly.
And even though he's a shapeshifter,
he still needs to borrow.
He still needs to borrow the cloak. But yeah, so one of the stories that she is prevalent in is the story of how she got her beautiful necklace Brisingamen. And as most sought after extravagant crafts like Thor's hammer or like Frey, her brother's ship, his magical ship, or like Odin's magical ring that duplicates itself, they're all dwarven make. And they're all these extravagant magical creations that the gods treasure and value more than pretty much anything else. And they're always kind of seeking those kind of things. The same thing like when Loki cut off all of Sif's hair and had to get it redone, he went to the dwarves to make magical, beautiful golden hair that like fused into her head and then would grow like normal hair, but it was gold. So much the same way, Freya is seeking this beautiful, enchanted, magical necklace that's like the most beautiful thing in all of existence. And she wants it for herself to like further like extend her own beauty and everything like that. But the dwarves who made it, or who possess it, refuse to give it to her unless she spends the night with each one of them, basically. And she does, although she's married. And the story goes like, her husband's always away. We don't really hear anything about who her husband would be. But she comes back with the necklace, and word gets out for what she did for it, and he pretty much abandons her and leaves Asgard, like, forever to just, like, walk the other worlds. And, like, every night she weeps golden tears because of, like, the loss of him, essentially, which is very tragic. So all of that was legitimate in terms of the mythology, which is always great to see. But then also they took it to the next level, and they're, like, making her out to be Freya, like this powerful shield maiden, like, warrior princess woman, essentially. Very, like, Viking Xena-esque. But then giving her that, like, other feminine side, and then, like, the actual, like, the literal golden tears that she's, like, that was a really cool touch.
That was.
Just, like, story-wise, or, like, storytelling-wise, and also, like, metaphorically and symbolically, and that was just a cool touch.
I think that this is what the show excels at when they do things right, is taking that mythology and bringing it to the foreground in the visual sense like this. Like, you know, obviously you wouldn't expect, even in Viking Age or present day or whatever, you wouldn't expect to see somebody crying gold tears, but it's very symbolic. And it's very well placed, and they do it so well when they want to do it.
Yeah.
And this was extremely well done.
Surely this is taking a long time.
You think?
What is it?
The baby is lying in the wrong position. Torvi cannot deliver it naturally.
I have come to pray for the woman and child.
Is he wearing a... He's wearing a troll cross.
Oh, I noticed that. Wait, so what happens? Did it turn around?
I guess.
Alright.
Because of his
worked.
prayers.
Good thing he wasn't praying to Jesus.
I think he was. So it sounded like he was praying in Latin, so I assume it was Jesus.
Oh, okay. I didn't catch that.
I hate troll crosses. So supposedly, the idea behind it is that people would wear them to protect themselves against trolls and malevolent magic in the Viking Age. However, where it came from was the 1990s. A woman found one on her property, lost it, and made a recreation of it based on what she's telling us it was.
So sort of like out of her memory, essentially.
Yep. So we don't know if she's just lying. There's nothing to base that information on. It was also in the 1990s when it first came out. There's never been like anything else like it.
I mean, given that it came from her memory, like, if you look at the basic shape of what it looks like, sort of like that,
Also
it's,
has the...
yeah, and, you know, little twigglies, it almost, like, looks like the Odal rune.
So that's the main thing.
Like a round version of it.
That's what everybody says about it. That's what literally everybody says. To be like, well, it's hypothetical because it looks just like the Odal rune. It doesn't mean...
Well, no, I'm just saying, like, if she, you know, let's say designed it out of memory of, you know, something that she did find, it could have been, like, an Odal rune of some kind, maybe? I don't know.
The only other random little thing I've seen that could possibly relate to it, I don't remember if it's Viking or Vendel Age or anything like that specifically, but it was almost like a little decoration on, like, a knife sheath, and it was literally exactly that shape, but then the ends, like, wrapped crazy amounts around. Like, all on, and they were these big, like, scroll works, just, you know, looped around and doubled and stuff like that, in that kind of same shape that's reminiscent of it. But they were also, like, tiny. But she was saying that, like, this pendant thing is something that, like, they found on her property, could not produce, and then just, like, made, like, or had made a representation of whatever that was. So there's nothing to base it on whatsoever.
How did he get there?
You look like shit. What are you wearing?
Good question.
The one time a show's character also questions.
What do the Norse believe in?
They're Christians. They believe in a Christian God.
Then we are not only
fighting for ourselves, but for our gods!
I mean, this show does a pretty good job of kind of showcasing the struggle between heathenry and Christianity back in the Viking Age, because that was definitely a huge part of why a lot of battles were fought and why places were raided and everything else.
I think the struggle was more on the Christian side of things.
Oh, of course.
Like, a lot of the Norse kind of, like, happily converted. And also, like, didn't really understand it at times. like a lot of times, like, the early examples of conversions, you see it in like, Denmark a fair amount. They, like, took on Jesus Christ as an additional god in their pantheon. I love that so much. It's so cool. And they were like, no, you're doing it wrong. You're not worshiping God. And they're like, oh, no, we are. Yeah, look, he's up there. He's with them. It's fine. Yeah, no, he's there.
Just like the rest of the gods.
Just like the rest of them. They're like, no, that's the problem. What? It's the other ones we're worried about. Oh, don't worry about it. You don't have to worship them if you don't want to. It's fine. Like, no, you can't worship them. Like, oh, no. No. In, like, the sagas and stuff, conversions are, like, heavily suspect and, like, argued. Like, you see it in Njál Saga a fair amount. Like, when families kind of get together and talk about the goings-on, a lot of the time the conversation will boil down to, like, hey, you should be a Christian. And then the other guy being like, hey, bull... and, like, destroying the house in his fury kind of thing.
Well,
like, back and forth.
There's also stories of when, Christians and heathens were trying to go into, like, business, essentially. And, the Christians basically said, in order for us to trust you, you have to convert to Christianity.
Yeah.
So, in this case, like, the Norsemen, the heathen, would convert. They wouldn't, like, convert, but they'd go through the motions and be like, okay, I am a Christian now.
Get baptized and just do the whole thing.
Yeah, and then they'd do business, but at the same time, it's not like they became Christians just by doing that.
Yeah, but, like, and then there was also a huge thing. There's, like, a huge stipulation on, like, any peace agreement between, like, the Vikings and whoever, was that, like, they had to convert. Mm-hmm. So you see it a ton as well, like, in the historical documents and, like, treatises or like sagas and tales or chronicles or anything like that. Like when they were given Normandy, when they were allowed to leave certain places that they tried to invade and, like, couldn't, or, like, anytime they kind of came to an agreement with, like, a Christian rulership, it was always a stipulate that they had, like, the leaders and whoever else they wanted to had to convert to Christianity, and, like, as a show of faith, basically, as a sign of, like, good. I mean, literally as a show of faith,
yeah.
But, like, as a sign of, like, trust, I guess, which is a little bit insane. I've heard some scholars and stuff like that kind of, like, debate and try to challenge the idea that, like, religion, like, the conflict of religion was as heated as it's kind of portrayed, but, like, a lot of the documents and stuff that we have show that it is. Mm-hmm. However, almost all the documents that we have written down were by Christians after the period, so they try to emphasize that religion as well. So it's kind of hard to say for sure. But there was absolutely, we do know, a fair amount of, like, questioning and arguments and, like, difficulty, and it was a huge topic because it was so heavily involved everywhere that they went. Mm-hmm. So it was absolutely one of, like, the main kind of cards on the table. Is like, you're heathen, I'm Christian, that's a problem.
Maybe if you don't look at it so much in terms of, like, religion, it was also a cultural clash for them. Because culture-wise, they were extremely different from one another.
Sure.
And while, the gods that they believed in, probably answered the conversation the same way that it does these days, you know? Like, nowadays, you know, we still have people who are not very accepting of others' beliefs, and we have other people who, you know, can give two about it.
Pretty much.
You know, it was probably the same thing, you know, in those days, but Christianity historically has been a religion that has always sought to capture everybody's attention.
Pretty much. And it was appealing to a lot of people, too, during the Viking Age as well. You know, it was a religion for everybody. But we also have plenty of evidence and plenty of documents that show that, you know, Christians and heathens did live, like, side by side. They coexisted plenty of times.
Yeah, exactly.
And even after, like, Iceland, as a minute example, after they converted on a national basis, you were still allowed to be heathen. You just had to do it in secret, out in the woods, by yourself, essentially, or, like, with your heathens. Like, you had to still keep it, like, on the way down low, but they didn't completely, like, eradicate it. It wasn't like, all right, everybody now is Christian starting now, and if you're not, you die. It was just like, we are now going forward Christian. That is going to be the main thing. If you're heathen, you just can't do it where we can watch you do it. You have to go...
Take it out back.
Take it out back, whisper about it. It's actually where a lot of the, like, the satanic occultist... Like, witch in the wood kind of stuff, like, came about. Like, or at least I think. It kind of came from that idea of, like, well, you can do it, but you got to do it secret out in the woods. And then people were like, oh, don't go to the woods, there's witches there. And it's like, well, yeah,
that makes a lot of sense, honestly.
That was because of you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, honestly.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, the whole thing, so I know we had talked about it before, how in Oleg's time, at least, Russia was not yet converted to Christianity. They were very much heathen. I'm thinking that they probably made them Christians just for this storyline's sake, so that they can say, oh, they're going up against Christians, the stakes are higher.
Religious conflict.
Yeah. So I think that's where they were coming from, specifically just from the storyline perspective.
That's true. But, and kind of just to build off of things, again, like, while I'm kind of thinking about it and, like, digesting it in my head and stuff like that, like, it still was very much an important thing for them, you know, because it wasn't just, like, a religion necessarily, it was their history, it was their culture, as you mentioned beforehand.
And also beliefs, you know, where they came from.
It was where, it was how they were born and raised, it's the same faith that their fathers had and their fathers' fathers, and, like, their ancestors back to the beginning had, basically. So to abandon that and to call it wrong or false and to take up a whole new doctrine is, like, an insult to their entire lineage. Which, again, as a cultural thing, they had a lot of ancestor worship. They often, like, names would skip generations, so you'd be named after your grandfather a lot of the times, at least for the men, and things like that.
So you have Ketil Bjornsson,
and
Bjorn
then Bjorn
Ketilsson,
and Ketil Bjornsson, and Bjorn Ketil. I mean, honestly, no, you see it a ton, like, with, like, that's why every king's name is Harald. Like, Harald Svensson gave birth to Sven Haraldsson, who gave birth to Harald Svensson, who gave... Sven, Harald, Sven, there's more than two names, guys!
Drink to the birth of our son. We have decided to name him Ragnar, after his grandfather.
What did I say?
It's like we can write the show ourselves.
Ragnar Sigurdsson. Uba Ragnarsson. Ragnar Ubason.
Skál.
Skál!
I want to thank all of you for your help. But since I lived in England, I could not help but recall them. They were Christian prayers to a Christian God.
Told you.
Who are you? My name is Eric. I come as emissary from King Björn. Here is his ring to prove it. Very well.
Can you, like, back up real quick to the beginning of the scene? I want to see if that chainmail poncho I saw was, like, an actual thing or not.
Ugh.
Or if I just imagined it. Dude on the left.
Who are you? My name is Eric.
No, not you. Not you, the one on your left. The one on your right. Who the f*** are you?
They didn't
with the chainmail poncho bull. Who are you?
Okay.
No, I know who you are. Shut up. I'm talking to him.
Okay. Here's the thing about chainmail. It was used to, you know, stop you from getting chopped into pieces, and it was very expensive. It took a long time to make, and he would not make it into a poncho.
Now I'm like hyper focusing on all their outfits, and it's all terrible.
I mean, that one specifically.
I mean, that one's specific, but like
and
everything.
you only see him in that like one shot, and he's already out of frame, and you're never going to see him again for the rest of the scene, probably because they realize how dumb it looks.
Yep.
Even by their standards.
Yep.
Chainmail ponchos were not a thing. Wait, he's back in Kiev?
Already, yeah.
I wish you would have been behind that.
They're only like a day's travel away, didn't you know? To the Game of Thrones.
Are we watching Game of Thrones again? Is this what it is?
Yeah, that's what it's become. Didn't you know?
My greatest ambition, the purpose of my life, was to become king of all Norway. And now that I have achieved it, I don't know why. Why must I be dragged down?
We had talked about Harald before. How
Plenty
he
of
became
times.
king of Norway and everything.
Plenty of times.
We have not talked about why he had that ambition.
Well, no? Really?
No, we actually haven't because, and this actually came up, I think it was season 4-ish or something like that, where we saw the woman that he actually loved and decided to let go of.
Did we see that?
Yeah, they did show that. A little bit of a bastardized version of it, but they did.
Surprise.
Kind of wanted to touch on that just because he just was talking about, you know, his life's ambition being becoming king of Norway. And because we're not covering whichever season that was where they actually showed that, I kind of wanted to talk about that now.
I remember his introduction to the show, and it was still when Ragnar was alive, so I think it was in season 4.
Yeah.
Season 3, like end of season 3.
Yeah, maybe season 3. So the way that the story goes is when Harald was younger, he fell in love with a woman, as one does.
As we are wont to do.
And he proposed, you know, to her. He asked for her hand in marriage, and basically she said that he was not wealthy enough. He didn't have enough money or renown for her, essentially. So he decided to change that. And basically, he asked her to give him a chance to wait and everything. And from that moment on, what he vowed was that he would not cut his hair until he was king of all of Norway. And that became basically his life's work. It became what he was always striving for with everything that he did, which is why he started the conquering of the lands throughout Norway to gain the renown, to gain the fame, to gain the wealth, the armies, everything that he needed so that he could overtake others and become king of Norway so that he can then come back to her and ask for her hand in marriage again and marry her.
During that time period, he was known as Harald Tangle Hair, which I'm a little bit upset about, actually, just because I think in the show they still introduced him as Harald Fairhair.
They did.
Yeah. So during that time period, he was called Harald Tangle Hair because he swore to never cut his hair, never brush his hair, so it was just this mess.
It was basically a dread.
I mean,
most likely.
That's probably what it came down to. Which is also very symbolic as well, because it was like a very pronounced show of intimacy for a woman to brush her hair. Like oftentimes when you show intimacy, like in public and things like that, the man would kind of like sit next to the woman or like put his head in her lap and she'd like brush his hair or like make him a shirt, little things like that. Were very symbolic gestures. So the show to actually comb his hair at the end of his conquest was symbolic in a sense as well. Mm-hmm. However, when he finally did conquer Norway and become king of all Norway and became known as Harald Fairhair, he actually had like his number one dude do it. Speaking of, could you imagine trying to comb your dreaded out hair with this?
Yeah, that would be difficult.
Yeah.
So if you take a look at a regular comb, right, you know, it would still be really difficult to comb out dreads with these, but I have seen people actually do it. It's pretty impressive. But pit that against a Viking comb. So this is a bone comb, and it's actually prone to breaking if you stress it enough, like so. It is actually really difficult to untangle your hair on a good morning.
Yeah, try combing your beard and your hair. Like, you've done this at events for me and stuff.
Yeah, and I've tried to actually comb out my hair at events too.
It's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The morning, like, of the second day when I want, you know, Thor to braid my hair or something
Yeah,
like
exactly,
that.
yeah.
Trying to untangle it is a nightmare.
Yeah.
After years of that, I applaud him from sitting through that and not cutting it all off.
Seriously. Yeah, a quick tidbit, I guess, about like combs specifically. So these are both copies of combs. They're made of bone. They're built in the exact same way that they would have been in the Viking Age. The carvings of this one, I actually got this one at Midgårdsblot in Norway, which is really great. The carvings on it are found on, I think it was copied from carvings in Oslo, the Osberg ship, I believe.
think so, yeah.
So it's kind of reminiscent of that. But combs were found everywhere, actually. They're one of the most found archaeological items in Viking graves. And one of the main ways that people are able to tell, or that archaeologists are able to tell that it's a Viking grave, is based on the find of combs. They were so prevalent.
They're also inherently thicker too, so you try to get it through your hair and it kind of like glides over your hair half the time.
That's true. And then when you actually are able to kind of like sink it in, it like kind of
Yeah.
yanks on you. So yeah. But I just wanted to show you a couple like actual examples
Yeah.
that we use when we're reenacting, that we bring along with us. We always kind of have at our side.
Yeah.
Cool stuff.
To use every once in a while if we want to be super Viking, or to just talk to people about it and show them exactly what they would have used.
Yep.
It's always fun.
Cool.
I agree. But only if Björn's forces, his warriors, and his shield maidens come to me to protect the capital and not Kantikan, then I agree.
I'm just going to stop it again to say that's a terrible leadership. You don't want to like turtle at the capital and let all the forces come through across your cities, because the cities have stockpiles of food and are what buffer the people away from the capital, which is the most important part of the district. Like,
So-
you want to defend those outliers and repel them there before they get to the city.
So if the Rus are coming after Kattegat, that's where the forces should go.
Yeah. They need to go and meet them head on, because otherwise they're just going to be able to get all the stockpiles and have like a full made like district, city, township, whatever, that they can then like defend and fortify. That's stupid. You're handing them whatever.
You arrive in interesting times.
So I understand.
He's actually wearing
My
like a
brothers told me that
pretty
you intend to-
like good looking tunic there.
It looks like a cotton kaftan.
Do you think it looks like cotton?
It looks like it looks thin.
I mean, linen is thin.
Yeah, but hard to tell.
I mean, it doesn't look too bad for me for the show, honestly.
I mean, from this shot, no, it's not bad. I think like the ones that we see a lot, like the reconstructions, are actually based off of ones found in like Ukraine,
Which makes sense.
which makes total
Yeah.
sense. So like we found fragments in Birka and like in Denmark and stuff like that, but then the replicas based on that information that we found are based on the style of a more complete one that we found in like Ukraine or Belarus, I think, is where it was, much further east than what we found. The whole idea is that like the Vikings had some influence that kind of came over from the Eastern Rus Slavic areas where that grave find kind of was sort of in part of, and it kind of came into play in Birka and became like a Eastern cool fashion, basically. So it wasn't something that was specifically Viking as a like Viking as a root, but it became popular, at least for a time, when they started to kind of interplay and assimilate with the Eastern provinces.
Right.
Yep.
If you still agree to this plan, simply nod your head.
Head cloak. That's the wraparound one that I was talking about.
Oh, yeah.
So actually, interesting fact. So so fur was not used as like a clothing accessory like you see with Ivar here. It was used more to like line cloaks, or like either like the edges or the insides to kind of keep it more warm, like on the left that we see. But also a really cool thing is that on the I think it's called the Klappenrock style, on the one that we found from the Viking Age, and I believe it's Hedeby, they actually used faux fur. So they wove a tapestry of wool, and they used like raw wool, like outer shed from the clippings from the sheep, in place of it to look like fur.
That's crazy.
But it was all just like raw wool woven into a thing that they sewed on.
That's crazy.
So they actually had faux fur, and I think the theory is that they actually dyed it like a really weird color, almost like a pale blue or like a pale pink, I think. But they did that, and it was like wicked poofy and like bunchy and big, and it would just go along like the borders like that. So they used it like to accessorize and little things here and there.
Yeah, that
like
is
this.
basically like what you're looking at. That right there. That's exactly how they would have used it.
So that is actually a great example.
That's perfect.
Yeah. Also, wasn't this idea of like this regimented infantry, like you're saying right there?
Yeah, I think that is a little too structured even for the ruse. He said it's the end of the pagan gods.
Oh.
Right. He is a pagan.
He's supposed to be pagan.
Yeah, he is a pagan.
Yep. Nothing really new that we complained about, I don't think. It was mostly just kind of reiterations of the standard, typical misrepresentations that we normally see.
Yeah, so, I mean, the cool thing in this episode was definitely the scene with the saga.
Yes.
The scene with the mythology.
Yes.
Intercepted into it. So
yep, that was awesome. That was a really high point for it, I think.
Yeah. And that's awesome that they actually included that because I miss having that in Vikings.
Same. I miss having that in general. It's really great to finally see, honestly. And yeah, that's like a thing that I've been holding on to this whole time.
For sure.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. That was great. That was a good point for it. There's random things that we'll always see and we'll always complain about. Stuff that we don't talk about anymore, which is like the furs and some of the general outfit designs. But some stuff we have to talk about, like the troll cross or a chainmail poncho, because it's brand new. And we just have to point it out, by the way. I feel like the troll cross more so than anything else, just because like that is a thing that often gets mistaken as a historical item, and it's not at all. Something we actually didn't talk about was Harald's whole escapade on like killing Eric as an outlaw. 100% yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly what would have happened, and we actually talked about that. I think last
we talked
episode.
about we talked about like the general idea of being an outcast and that a couple times because we've had that instance a few times throughout the series, but we didn't mention anything about when Harald addressed it, and I guess it's because we've already gone over the topic, but it's still good to see as well. Yeah. So that's kind of like two really good instances that we have, like that, like the storytelling in how they did Freya and how she got Brisingamen with that marriage thing that would happened, and then also, with the treatment of the outlaw.
For sure.
Which is really nice. But then, like, a lot of the other stuff is, like...
I would say, like, as far as things go, like, this episode was a little bit higher than the last one. Because the last one was kind of, like, very borderline, minimal. This one kind of raised stakes up just a little bit. With, the couple of scenes that we had talked about already. So, yeah, I think... overall, this was a pretty decent episode. Yeah,
I'm still gonna give it like a 6. Like Same. It wasn't anything like spectacular, but it was fine. It was better than what we've normally seen, what we've already seen, for most of the season. So yeah, I have nothing to really complain about in any drastic, immediate, medically necessitative sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. 6 for me as well.
Cool. Cool.
Thank you so much for watching, guys. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you can be notified of our future videos. And we'll see you in the next one.